All right, YouTube, there has now today been a new Snowden leak. People were expecting that he would leak more information. He's already said it would get more damaging over time. Today, I think we found out, this is still relatively early in the leaks, I think we're finding out just how damaging some of the material he has really is. Because what he released today could, in theory, knock out Obama's presidency and relegate him either to utter lame duck status or get him impeached. This is something that's going to, I think, if I'm making a correct prediction here, I think Congress is going to seriously start going after the NSA's very existence. And I think you're going to see a level of public outcry about this specific leak, and link is in the description, that you haven't seen with previous links. People were already pissed off when they realized that the NSA was tapping metadata, and that was one of the first leaks. But they overlooked it because it was explained away by the Obama administration. Then, of course, you found out that metadata tapping is unconstitutional. A federal judge has already ruled that. He's letting an appeal happen, but it is unconstitutional. That sets a precedent for everything else the NSA is doing. Then we found out it was also foreign heads of state. You know, they were data sharing with other spy organizations. It was also email and basically everything posted on social media. It's World of Warcraft, for Christ's sake, so they're probably spying on every other online game too. But this leak, above others that have happened, I think is going to seriously make Obama sweat. I think he may have just witnessed the death knell of his administration in sort of a Nixon-esque way, because of course Richard Nixon did something vaguely similar to this right before Watergate, and we'll get into that as well regarding the leak. Turns out the NSA was spying on Israel. If you know anything about American politics, you know AIPAC and certain organizations that happen to be headed by Israelis or Jews in general hold a relatively large amount of wealth and power in this country. Not to get into conspiracies or anti-Semitism or anything. You're not really supposed to even criticize Israel, otherwise sometimes you get labeled an anti-Semite. But most people in this country support Israel. And our foreign policy and domestic policy both reflect that widespread belief among certainly evangelicals that Israel is populated by God's chosen people, the chosen people of this Jehovah. I can already hear the evangelicals lashing out at Obama. Now, that's not a huge issue to him, because most evangelicals already hate him. They tend to be Republicans anyway. The fact that he's black isn't boding well for him among the evangelicals either, because a lot of these people live in the Deep South. There's at least some racism holding on there. But Obama has just essentially alienated his most powerful ally, which is AIPAC. You got to understand, the Jewish population of this country is one of the furthest left, most heavily democratic voting blocs in the country. Now, while they may be small in number, they have a very large amount of wealth. That means political campaign funds. It means probably backroom deals, but everyone does that. Clinton was getting money from the Chinese. It means a lot of airtime, because certain media outlets happen to be run by people of the Jewish faith too. Obama's just alienated all these groups. When this hits the mainstream media, because right now I'm seeing it only on RT, it's going to be a free-for-all. And it's going to be tough for Obama to explain why the same country, with the NSA was sharing sensitive data, on Americans too, by the way, with Israel. Now he has to explain why at the same time he was overseeing this, and I'll explain more in a minute, why we were also simultaneously spying on Israeli leaders, including the Prime Minister of Israel's personal email. Nutty Yahoo's personal email. The unreasonable nature of doing so, even if you don't particularly support Israel and think they should be monitored, I personally think that there's nothing wrong with spying on Israeli heads of state, because it's an unstable region that's nuclear armed. It's a fair-weathered ally at best that pretends to be our greatest ally. Most of the population and most of the politicians don't believe so. I happen to. But it's still going to be interesting to see Obama try to work through this. I don't understand why they would be doing this. They had to have known it was a bad idea. And Obama, I hate to say this because I am nonpartisan, and I understand that the NSA spying, a lot of this spying began under Bush, for which Bush is completely culpable. A federal judge has already ruled the metadata collection, which was already going on under Bush, unconstitutional. That's his to own. This, however, was not happening under Bush. Under Bush, the NSA's activities were primarily relegated to metadata collection, which we've already established is primarily Bush's fault, and Obama continued it. He didn't expand that particular spying any more than it already had been. But Bush is responsible for that. Obama is responsible for almost all of the other intel that's being received through the NSA at the moment, because it was massively expanded under him. And I will say, anyone who believes that the NSA began collecting this level of data, all the emails, all the metadata, stuff on foreign heads, the Germans, the UN, bugging the UN building while they were in session, anyone who believes that this went on without Obama's tacit approval is crazy. He had to have known that this was going on. Otherwise, if he didn't know, he has to be a complete puppet and completely oblivious to everything that's happening in this country. He has to be utterly and totally inept not to have known that this was going on. And if he knew about one aspect, I'm sure he had the curiosity to check in on what else they were doing. He had to have known that they were spying on the Israelis and tapping Merkel's phone and going through the Prime Minister of Israel's personal email. He had to have known that they were monitoring World of Warcraft and collecting all metadata, which is unconstitutional. I would say most things that the NSA has been doing are blatantly unconstitutional. Even if they're not labeled unconstitutional, they're unconscionable, they're immoral, they're directly against our patriotic views and values. They're in direct contradiction with common sense, and even people from the intelligence community are calling them out as inefficient methods. Blanket surveillance doesn't really work. It didn't prevent the Boston bombings, yet they keep saying, well, it's stopping hundreds of terrorist attacks. They won't name any of them. We could be seeing right now the death of the Obama administration, a slow strangulation by courtesy of Edward Snowden, being intelligent enough rather than to dump all this at once through WikiLeaks or something, simply releasing it bit by bit by bit, and releasing probably the juicier pieces of intel so that they get into the mainstream media. When this hits CNN, when this hits Fox, when this hits all the other networks, you are going to see an explosion of mass chaos directed at Obama. You're going to see 100 million evangelicals pissed off. You're probably going to see a reaction from Israel, which, by the way, again, Republican or Democrat, most people in this country deeply support Israel. This is going to lose him I would think, quite a bit of support among his own party. Look for Congress, once this generates enough public outcry, which it likely will, to immediately begin ramping up investigations against the NSA. You might even see a push to simply get rid of the NSA altogether, pending the creation of some other more regulated program directly under the control of Congress. What Obama has done is fuck himself. He has now taken a cactus and shoved it up his own ass, because he's alienated the last group of people which overwhelmingly supports him. You've seen, even in polls, even the Latinos, which he promised the moon on a stick to, have largely lost their support for him. The Jewish groups in this country still widely supported him because he still seemed to generally support Israel. They had a few bones to pick with him, but nothing major. So he still had 2/3, 3/4 support amongst them. He's not going to have that anymore. A lot of these people who deeply support Israel are going to throw him under the bus. Every time Snowden releases something new, we find out just how devious, dirty, and backhanded all of this collection is. Again, though, I don't particularly support Israel's actions, but do I think that we need to go after their prime minister? Probably not. This blanket collection method, the sharing of intel with even the British, just doesn't sit well with me. We're going after the Germans, for God's sake. And you can bet that that was probably at the behest of the British because they're a competitor in the Eurosphere with Germany for basically the head of the EU position, because Great Britain and Germany keep having a continual dickfest. And other EU countries have said Germany's economy is basically doing too well. They're exporting too much. Let's crush them underfoot and put sanctions on them for some reason. This doesn't make any sense, what we're doing as a nation. And the people don't support it. Clearly, most of the population is deeply uncomfortable with what the NSA is doing. It seems it's literally out of Orwell. It's literally out of Brave New World and Animal Farm and Blade Runner and every other dystopian fiction you can possibly think of. And now it turns out that Obama has decided to backstab the last group in the country that still overwhelmingly supports him. I say overwhelmingly because even among blacks, which he enjoyed something like 90% approval among, it's falling. The Jewish people were the last group of people that really stuck up for him through thick and thin. He's not going to get that benefit anymore. He's going to lose so many approval points among the Jewish population, it's going to be astronomical. At least that's my prediction. But you read the link in the description. I just don't understand. I know that Obama probably wasn't counting on a rogue employee going whistleblower. And at this point, Snowden, he's a whistleblower, he's not a traitor. If someone's saying that he's a traitor, they either don't understand the Constitution, they also don't understand how federal judges work, or they're being paid to post, paid by some group. You're going to see Obama fold. I wouldn't be surprised if eventually these leaks over the course of the next year force him to resign. That's a prediction I would not have made before Snowden began revealing stuff, especially now that they have admitted. I think it was the Department of Defense there that admitted that Snowden has a lot more than they originally gave him credit for. Their first reaction when Snowden came out was he doesn't have shit. This is the best he can do. Haha, nobody cares. It's just metadata. We explained this years ago. Everyone already knew it was going on. It's constitutional. It's not, but they claimed it at the time. Then it was, oh no, yeah, actually he got quite a bit more than we believed. But don't worry, people, it's all above board. Then it turns out, I think he leaked some stuff that they didn't think that he had. This might be amongst it. And they said, shit, he's probably grabbed everything. Literally every piece of intel he could possibly have. He's got in his doomsday cache right now, triple encrypted. Snowden gets rounds of applause unending from me for doing what he did. He knew that it was going to ruin his life potentially. I think what Snowden's banking on, however, is that this will steamroll continuously, week after week, release after release, and eventually people will get so pissed off they'll force Obama to resign and elect somebody that actually understands the Constitution who's likely to then pardon Snowden. They're likely to do that. If Snowden is seen as the people's advocate, then any sitting president would do well and raise their own approval by doing so. Even if Snowden then accidentally dies in a tragic boating accident or accidentally falls out of a helicopter like the Navy SEALs that went and got Osama did, at least they would temporarily raise their approval. I don't understand why Obama has sat by silently. He has to know that Snowden's got a lot of dirt to dish out. And if this isn't even the end of it, and it's going to get even worse after this, just think what he's going to leak next. It's become literally week after week, release after release, you just sit back with bated breath awaiting that next pile of dirt to fall right on the White House. And again, not to be partisan, but Obama largely owns the entire mess because we've got to assume he knew that this was going on, and it was during his tenure that it was expanded to this level. Bush primarily used it to spy on foreign individuals in third world countries that generate terrorists. You can argue over whether it was effective, you can argue over whether it made sense to do so, but most people didn't have a problem with that. Most of the domestic surveillance side of this has happened since 2012, other than the metadata, as far as we know. I believe that Snowden did the right thing. I believe that eventually he'll be fully pardoned and repatriated into the United States. I believe he'll attain full hero status because, again, he says he's got thousands or millions more pieces of intel to leak and that he's saving the best for last. Well, what next? The NSA is spying on a moon colony on the dark side of the moon or something. You'd almost believe that that could be possible simply because if this is some of the more mild information that Obama decided to backstab his most powerful ally that fully supports him in everything he could possibly do. My goodness, you can't even imagine what's coming next. So, interesting story. Turns out we're spying on Israel, which every politician in the United States is willing to suck them off because it gets them elected. I can't wait for the next bit of intel to be released. Peace out.